Nu ska vi se. So.
Is it working?
I think so. Let's see if anyone is here, but we are live. We are actually live for a little Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
And here's your coffee.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so we're here for a little Q&A, questions and answers. And yeah, we're just gonna see if we can answer some of your questions.
I've come all the way from London to participate.
Yes, and you had a terrible journey actually down to
Brighton. I did. Well, it wasn't terrible.
Well,
it could have been terrible if I'd chosen the wrong train.
Yes, that would have been terrible. Right, so who's here? Do you want to just like maybe type a little thing for us so we can see who's here with us? Would be great. Maybe
no one's with us.
Maybe no one's with us. No, I think
Talking
we have
to ourselves here.
Yeah. Yes. So the idea with this Q&A was just to, I guess, I don't know, connect with you and come and see you and see what questions you have, and maybe we can help you a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Skype lesson, but not on Skype.
But not on Skype, exactly. Yes. Well, maybe we'll just start talking about some of the questions that you've posted for us, perhaps. Should we do that?
Yeah. Start with the first one.
Yes.
You can start with the first one.
Shall I start with the first
one?
one?
I can listen.
And you can listen. I'll have some Swedish sweets.
Yes.
Daniel's brought us Swedish sweets.
Gott och blandat.
Gott och blandat. It's delicious. Okay, so one of the questions that came up was, what's the best way to remember words? And I guess this is something that everyone will think about when you're trying to learn a new language. I mean, not just Swedish, but any language. And how to, if there are any particular techniques that you can use to memorize words. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'll just say a little bit what I usually say to my students on Skype. And I think it's quite important that you do have some sort of system, because when you're learning a new language, you're exposed to a lot of new vocab. And, you know, it's fine to just, you just sit and you learn them and you see them and but of course you need to practice them, you need to remember them. So, I'm quite a fan of flashcards. I think flashcards are quite good. And there's a lot of flashcards, like there's apps that you can use.
We do use flashcards on the Quizlet.
Yeah, because that is a flashcard kind of app.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Quizlet I think is really good. And but I think the idea is really to, firstly take down all the new words that you learn, if you have a lesson or if you're exposed to something, if you look in a book or whatever you're doing. And I think making a list of those words, of course. But then I think it's like, I think the worst thing you can do is to just make a list and then leave it for a week until next lesson or
use it
whatever.
somehow.
You need to use it. You need to get your hands dirty, if that makes sense. So I think using them, and of course there's like, a flashcard app or a flashcard, even if you just do physical flashcards, it's that will prompt you to remember it. And I think it's important probably to do it, to go through those new words quite soon after you've learnt them. So, ideally after a lesson, for example, you might want to go through them, I don't know, after the lesson, maybe half an hour after or an hour after, at least that same day. I think that's helpful.
Yeah. There's like 25% you lose, I think, if you don't do anything after the lesson.
Yeah.
I think it's something like that. So.
Yeah. I've also heard, and I don't know, I don't have the scientific...
I think I got that number from you, actually.
Oh, was that me? Okay. Okay. So yeah, so I think the idea of trying to do it quite soon after the lesson, and then maybe again the next day, and then maybe again after a couple of days, but then not just looking at the words, but actually using them. And of course, this is a problem if you don't live in Sweden, you have no one to practice with. But I think one thing that you can do is at least write down some example sentences, right? So just try and...
Some people put up sticky notes.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
All over the place. So they have like the whole flat is full of sticky notes.
Yeah. And
that could be an idea, maybe.
Yeah. If there are physical sort of object things.
Yeah, if it's objects.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think having some kind of tools, some kind of maybe flashcards, if that's something that you like. And there's a lot of flashcard apps. I mean, we have a couple of lists on Quizlet, the Swedish Made Easy, but I know some other students, they use a flashcard app called Anki. I don't know if you've heard about that one. It's an open source one, ANKI, and that one's quite useful too.
It's called ANKI.
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 Yeah, like the Swedish name, Anki.
That's fantastic.
I know. So yeah, I think revisiting them soon after you've learnt them, and then use them, and even if you can't speak them or use them in conversation, at least like write down example sentences of them. It is a little bit boring, but it's useful.
It doesn't have to be boring.
No, that's true. It doesn't have
to be. You can make fun sentences too.
That's true.
So
you can.
And I think that this might be one of the thing people remember from school, that I only wrote boring sentences.
Yeah.
I never give boring sentences to my students. They're always very, very far out or crazy.
Yeah.
Or just crazy. Yeah. So.
Just writing down crazy stuff. Well, it
helps you remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We also had a question specifically about partikelverb. And the partikelverb is well, in English we say phrasal verbs. So things like where you have a verb, and then you have often a preposition, and then the verb means one thing and the preposition another, but when you put them together, they mean something else. So tycker om, which is, so tycker means think, om means about, or if.
And that's actually a good word to confuse people, because I always tell my students that whenever you have a particular verb with om, it always means that you redo something.
Redo something. That's
whereas
right.
tycker om has nothing to do with redo.
Yeah.
So that's, it's quite tricky even for us teachers to make sense of our own language sometimes.
Yeah. That is so true. But yeah, so tycker om obviously means like when it's put together. So then it's like, okay, so you learn the verb tycker, and you learn the preposition om perhaps, and then how are you going to remember? I don't think there's a particular, I'm not aware of a particular method to try and learn partikelverb specifically. I think you just have to...
No, yeah, you just have to use them the same way you would keep learning any word, I think.
Right, but as a phrase, obviously.
Focus on the phrases, using them.
Yeah. But I was going to show you, I have got a book.
We have plenty of books here.
Yeah, we have plenty of books here. This one, I mean, it is in Swedish, but it's called Se upp. And this is a really comprehensive book with, let me see how many there are. I think there's like...
Which means look out, by the way.
Yeah.
So you can't translate it directly.
No, because se means see and up means up. So it's like, but you can also use it like watch out. Like se up. Like someone's trying to run across the road, you're like, se up. But yeah, so in this one, there's 169 phrasal verbs, partikelverb. So this one's quite good. Yeah, so if you are kind of, I don't know, level A2 or B1, I think it's a little bit difficult if you're like really a beginner, because you kind of...
You wouldn't be doing them if you're a beginner.
No, I think they really come into play in sort of level B1. I think there's a lot of partikelverb then.
End of A2, I think, something like that.
Yeah, I mean everyone learns tycker om quite early on, but otherwise. So yeah, you might want to check this one out. Se upp is a good one.
I definitely will.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Right. Should we have a look at some other? And by the way, if you have questions while you're listening to this or while you're watching
us sitting here,
then type into, because we can see when you type comments or questions. So if you come to think of something, then just let us know and we'll try and respond to you. Or if you have like a follow-up question on something that we say, just type in message for us. Okay.
Please do that.
Yes. Okay, next one. What's the best way to keep learning when you can't go to Sweden all the time? So what's the best way to keep up a pace when you're not in the country?
So I need to add something to this. There is the best way is the best way for you. So
yes.
if we say this is the best way, it might not be the best way for one particular person. But there are optimal ways of doing things, maybe, but they don't necessarily have to be the best ways.
No, it's not like a one size fits all.
Yeah, because it's so learning a language is difficult.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, it is. It takes time. So, what would you say the best way to keep learning when you can't go to the country, or because I feel like sometimes people are like, oh well, you can't learn a language without living there, and I actually think that's bullshit. Excuse me. I think it's rubbish. Of course, you can learn a language when you're not living in the country. You don't have to live there in order to progress.
Sometimes it hinders you if you live in the country while learning. If you're at a stage where you're not ready to be in the country, it might actually stop you from, because you kind of get overwhelmed by all the Swedishness when you come to Sweden.
All the Swedishness, all the weird Swedishness, yeah.
I mean, I get overwhelmed when I go to Sweden, so I'm kind of Swedish.
You're kind of Swedish.
Half.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, of course, today with technology, there's so many things that you can do.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, I probably don't need to tell you this, but like, I mean, there's stuff on YouTube. You can go to the Swedish radio, sr.se, sr.se, and have Swedish radio online, and you can listen to it. There's a good app that you can have on your phone, and you can listen to podcasts on there.
You can listen to Spotify, I think they have as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And there is a app that I use for my kids when they were much younger. It was a app to have them go to sleep. So you had all these animals in a house, in a barn or whatever around, and you could have that in different languages. So you had it in English, and then you could switch to Swedish, and then you would say "Good night, little piggy" or whatever, and "Good night, little spider," and then you would have a spider coming down. So you would get the words, and you would get the hearing from it as well.
Nice. That's nice. Do you remember what that app was called?
No, it was so long. But it's, I mean, it shouldn't be too hard to find it because it's on the App Store. So if you have an iPad, you should be able to type. I'm not an Apple person, so but I'm sure that if you know, there's probably similar stuff as well, because this was a couple of years ago now.
Yeah.
This was probably, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. So.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, like watch Swedish movies and try and surround. I'm also a big fan of like listen to Swedish music.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the Swedish lyrics, right? I mean, that's a nice way to
ballads, Swedish ballads from like the 70s or stuff like that. Like
What are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about
like Ted
Gärdestad, yeah, and I'm thinking about all these kind of visor, you know, folkvisor.
Yeah.
From Evert Taube or.
Actually, I have on Spotify. I can put that out after this live session. I have it on Spotify, a playlist with only Swedish, well, music from Sweden with Swedish lyrics. So I can put that into the comments afterwards, so you can listen to that.
Jedin morgon is a favorite one.
Who was that?
That was Fred
Åkerlund.
He's good.
Yeah. So I think I think there are definitely, you can use technology to surround yourself with a lot of Swedish language.
Yeah.
Technology, films, kind of cultural stuff.
And reading.
Reading, of course. Yeah.
There are 8 sidor.
Yeah.
There are other places you can read as well. So
yeah,
you don't have to be in Sweden.
No, and also I would say I know several of my students have bought easy to read books from LL Förlag, which are the same people that give out 8 sidor.
Okay.
And you can actually order online and they will send you against an invoice, I think, which is very trusting. So, and there in that one, I'll put the link after the session as well to that one. And there you can actually choose, they have different levels. So not like the A1, A2 level, but it's like super easy, moderately easy. And there's like different gradings of books. And some of them are kind of books that are written for that purpose, but there's also a lot of classics actually. I mean, like Fotografens död that we use
I've read it about 1 billion times by now.
We use it, it's a good book.
I know it by heart.
It's Henning Mankell, so the guy who wrote all the Wallander books. So that one, I think is, it's good. Don't say who the murderer is. Don't give
Wallander himself is the murderer.
But that one is from Läppläst Förlag.
Yeah. There's a lot of nodding in that book.
Oh yeah, he nods a lot.
So if you need to learn a word from nodding, you should read that book.
Yeah.
Because you won't forget it after you've read it.
Yeah, it keeps coming up. So yeah, I would say that's a nice way to. One thing that I would say, and I don't know if you agree with me or not, but sometimes people say that, oh yes, I'm gonna buy some books. I'm just gonna buy children's books because it's easy, and I say no, don't do that.
Don't do that. And it's what annoys, or it shouldn't annoy me, but what people usually say, oh, I'm going to get the classics. I'll get Astrid Lindgren.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read her books. And I'm like, well, those books were written 50 years ago, 60 years ago.
And the language is like, and you're also like, there's so many occupations and words for which has to do with like an older type of Swedish society, things that we don't have anymore.
Yeah.
Come on.
Swedish society has changed a lot since Astrid Lindgren wrote her books.
Sorry,
it's much better to read books like. So I'm going to steal this question from you now.
Yeah.
So I met the author of a book series that is very popular in Sweden at the moment called oh my gosh, what's the name? It's a detective bureau. So there are 2 kids having this detective stories basically, and what he's using in his books, I spoke to him about this. He's using old-fashioned language, kind of is Astrid Lindgren, and then he's using new modern language mixed up with it. So it's kind of a little bit of both, and I think that could be good. I've had one student already who Lasse-Majas detektivbyrå.
Oh, Lasse-Majas detektivbyrå.
Yes, that's what they call it. Yeah,
I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah. So I met him and his lovely wife once, and you know, we talked about these things, and it's really good if you're learning. I mean, you can't be a beginner either to do that, because all these books kind of require that you know a little bit of Swedish before you start.
Yeah.
And I think most Swedish fairy tales or, you know, children's stories require you to have some basic level of understanding.
Yeah.
Regardless, but don't start with Astrid Lindgren because that is.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
It is really, really difficult. I wouldn't say that's a beginner's.
No.
At all. And I guess if you're at the level A1, so kind of, you know, you're a beginner, you're just building up to things like being able to order in a cafe or, you know, talking about yourself a little bit. I guess there's not that much that you can do in terms of reading. You are a little bit stuck, I feel, with the course books. So like whatever you use, Livstarter or whatever, you know, there is a level in the beginning or a phase in the beginning where you just have to knuckle down and accumulate vocab.
Yeah, And there are websites. There are websites online. We can provide a link. Unga Fakta, for example. They have
write
like
this down actually, because we've said we're going to give links. I have to remember this.
right. So Unga Fakta has stuff about the Vikings, for example.
Yeah.
Or other things, and it's in Swedish, and it's for kids.
Yeah.
So it's written in a way that should be okay for kids. And if you're on a certain level with the language, then you should be able to
understand that.
I've read through it, and it seems to be on a kind of A2 level, maybe early A2 level.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've used that with my kids I taught in Svenska skolan, and they understood it, and so should be fine.
And of course, the other way to keep learning when you are not in the country is to try and find a conversation partner.
Yeah.
Somehow, if you can.
Absolutely.
And of course, that is really, really great. If you can. I mean, if you have somebody where you live that you can pester or I don't know, buy a fika for or something.
Yeah.
And that's great. Or I mean, there are also websites that you can use for like language exchange and so on. So if I suppose if it's a little bit difficult with Swedish, I have to say, because a lot of Swedes speak very good English.
Yeah.
So then people are not really going to want to learn English because they learn it at school. We learn it at school, don't we? So
from TV, that's what I know.
From TV, yeah, that's right. But yeah, if you can find somebody either via Skype or in person, then of course that's another good way to just keep up your motivation, get some practice, I think.
Yeah, stay active on the Facebook page.
Yeah, that's another thing as well. Maybe like join some groups on Facebook, some Swedish groups that are dealing with or that are about something that you are interested in. And even if you don't have to take part, you don't have to write anything, but you can just like read what they write, the comments and so on. That's another good thing that you can do. Or Twitter. Or any social media, I suppose. Next question that we got, and I think this one is for you, because you have so much more experience of teaching younger kids. What's the best resources to excite preteens about learning Swedish?
Okay, so this is, again, best resources. There is nothing you can call the best resource. You can only have the resources that fit you the best. And I can speak from my own experience. When I was teaching in Svenska skolan in London, I used resources from different places online. It depended on what I wanted to. It depended on what sort of resources we're talking about. So if we're talking about things like teaching directions, for example, I would have a treasure map, and I would have the kids fill out a treasure map and then learn the directions that way and telling each other the directions. If we're talking about, for example, how a house and learning different rooms in a house, different furnitures in a house, I would have them create the house and then, populate the house with different furnitures and stuff. And
so kind of contextualizing a lot, I guess.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Not just provide word.
Yeah, I wouldn't just throw out words, because that's always going to be pointless, regardless if you're an adult or a preteen. And I think another thing that I used was I would cut out fake Swedish money, and I would have a dialogue. For example, if they're going to go to the shop, because many of my students, they would be going to Sweden during their summer holidays with their parents, and they would go to the shop and they would be buying Swedish ice cream for the first time or whatever. And so we focus a little bit on the conversation you would have in a shop. And I would I would have them to have Swedish money, and we would talk a little bit, how do you say ice cream, how do you say money, and then we would exchange money. We would have some, vegetable toys or whatever. And I think most people who have kids also have vegetable toys. I know I do.
Yeah.
I have a box full of them. So I think the best resource you can use is your own imagination. I think thinking about what is it your preteens are interested in. So what is it you want to teach them? And then trying to use, role play always works with kids, always. I don't think I've ever met any student who doesn't like role playing. So whenever you can, pretend play about things, and try and make it as creative as possible. So I've taught kids online as well, and that's actually quite difficult because you don't have that kind of physical area in the same way. So I can't just jump around and draw stuff on my whiteboard like I'm used to. So online it would be more difficult, but it's definitely possible because you can still role play. You can still use, voices, and you can still kind of act. So I would say the best resource is your own imagination.
One thing that I wanted to ask you as well, because you just mentioned before we went on live that when you were learning Polish,
yeah, that's right,
that there were some ways, and you were a preteen then.
Yes, I was 8.
Yeah, and you said that there were some things that really did not work for you.
Yes.
What were they?
So I did, what's it called? Hemspråk.
Hemspråksundervisning, so home native language.
Yeah, because my mom is from Poland, so I had in school we had a teacher who came in, and all the Polish kids and we would be doing Polish lesson, and it was I just remember it was dreadfully boring. It was one of those memories I have that is just sitting in a room talking or drawing. And that's basically all we did. There was no context behind it. There was no learning going on really. And the thing that taught me how to speak Polish and understand Polish was, well, my grandmother, but also the kids I got to know in Poland. We played. We role played. We played hide and seek, predominantly hide and seek. And by playing that game, for example, I learned a lot of different new words, and I put it into context, and then so I learned it through playing. And in school I didn't learn any Polish at all. So I would say putting things into context, using your imagination, and have a clear idea of what is it actually you want to teach, and try and contain that idea as much as possible, so you don't because when you start learning about directions, for example, you can go on a tangent all over the place, and you wouldn't want to do that. It's better to just contain it and have that treasure map, and then make the treasure map from the beginning. So you have them draw it and have them learn, all the steps that have to be put in place in order to have a treasure map, and then give directions.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's more to it, but you can always ask in the chat if you have more questions about that.
Yeah. Okay. Should we just go through them in order? We'll just take the next one.
Well, let's start from the bottom.
Let's start from, shall we? Okay, now we'll do this one. We received a question which is about how to not feel deflated when you're being corrected by your partner on pronunciation. I think this example was particularly. So the feeling that when you're learning your partner's language and you're trying your best and you say something and then they correct you because they feel you're pronouncing it wrong, and maybe you are pronouncing it wrong.
You probably are.
You probably are, but then the feeling of just crap, how to not feel crap about that. We were talking a little bit about this earlier, and I think there's two elements to it. Do you want to give your example of, because you had somebody that was in this situation?
Well, I could take another example actually that I didn't mention to you, that just remembered now.
Mm-hmm.
So I was watching this tutorial video on a strategy game a few weeks ago, and the guy was from England, and he pronounced a few French names correctly in his tutorial video. Mm. And people didn't say that his video was great, because it was great. You know, you learn a lot about how to play the game. But what people were most impressed about was how he pronounced the French names. So they didn't thank him for the video. They didn't thank him that, you know, this is really nice because now I know how to play this game. But now they know that he knows how to pronounce certain towns in French.
Right.
So there is an obsession almost with
pronunciation.
If you don't pronounce something correctly, perfectly, then you don't speak the language.
Yeah.
And
that is really harsh, because I mean, when you're learning in the beginning, you're gonna make mistakes. You're learning. You're practicing, and with the Swedish pronunciation, there's definitely a couple of sounds, and we'll come back to one of them later on in this live session, that, you know, you need to use muscles that probably don't exist or they're dormant, or, you know, you're not using them in your language, your native language. So but I think it's fair to say that there's an added complication when it is your partner. Just because of the relationship that you have with them, and you want to look good in front of them, and you want to, you know, show that you are putting in the effort to learning their language. It's almost like a love. What am I trying to say? Like
a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, but it's also an expression of love, that you are so committed in the relationship that you want to learn their language, perhaps. And then to then be corrected can feel difficult. Can feel difficult. But I think it could be more so if it is your partner.
Yeah. Because
you obviously have a relationship with them,
and they know how to say or do something, but they usually don't know why.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
I mean, this is something that I often hear from my students. It's like, well, and you know, I get a new student, and they say, oh yes, I have a Swedish partner. Okay, have you been practicing with them, or are you learning with them? And they just said, no, it's impossible. Sometimes some people are really helpful, but just because you speak a language, just because, you know, your partner speaks Swedish, doesn't mean that they know why we say things in a certain way, or how to practice those muscles, or why, you know, this preposition comes with that verb, or whatever it might be. They don't know the rules for plural, you know, how to make nouns into plurals. So just because you have a partner that speaks the language doesn't mean that they are necessarily a good teacher, or that they know why or how we say things. So then that can lead to a lot of frustration. But I also think there's another aspect to this. So you feel really vulnerable, and you're going to feel vulnerable when you learn a new language, and especially then in front of your partner that you ideally want to probably impress, and, you know, so, but you have to try and get over that. You have to try and feel that it's okay to make mistakes. I mean, this is not, it depends on what kind of relationship you have with your partner, I suppose, if they are understanding and so on, because it's not helpful if they kind of just say, hey, that's wrong, you didn't do that properly, then that's not so helpful. But there's also part, I think, within the person who's learning the language, you have to just kind of go, okay, I said it incorrectly, I'm going to try and do it better, or work out how to say this. And it's not a big deal. Like, it doesn't mean that you've failed. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It doesn't mean that you can never learn it. And you have to stop putting a link between almost like your self-worth and your ability to speak the language at this level, wherever you are.
I can just see my mom, for example. She doesn't speak perfect Swedish. She's been in Sweden since mid-70s or something.
And she's Polish.
She's Polish, yeah, and I mean she speaks Swedish, obviously, and she's learned how to speak. She speaks perfectly Swedish, but it's just that she has sometimes N and et, for example, and that's something that will always haunt anyone who's learns Swedish. I think there will always be a word that you say wrong on it, and she does that quite frequently. And I used to correct her when I was an angsty teenager, because I thought, she needs to know how to speak this properly. But it's not a big deal. I mean, she's got friends regardless, and she's doing well in Sweden regardless, so it doesn't matter. And having a partner that wants to correct you all the time is more about them than about you. Because I have a friend who does that, and I've told them off several times, because I don't think it's definitely not helpful for anyone to do that, because the frustrated person gets more frustrated, because no matter how much they say to correct them, they still don't get it right, and the person who's being corrected gets frustrated because they do it wrong, and they think it's, if my partner doesn't acknowledge me or whatever, then it causes problems. So I think correcting like that is not good, not healthy at all.
I wonder as well if you can maybe take the reins, as in you can say, please, am I pronouncing this right? Can you correct me? You can ask for that feedback. Because then it's more like you're expecting it, you want to learn. It's like, let me try and say sjuksköterska.
But it has to be one thing at a time. I mean, one day they'll correct you on the pronunciation, and the other day will be N and et, and the third day will be verbs. And
then you just feel like
you can't be corrected on everything. No. It's just not going to be helpful. So I probably speak, my Polish is probably very bad, but people understand what I'm saying, and I'm fine. I don't really care if people say I pronounce something wrong. But I don't speak Polish now anyway, so it doesn't matter.
And I think also, like, you can't, I mean, when you're learning a language, especially as an adult, you're always going to have an accent. I actually think it's almost impossible to speak without any accent if you've started learning the language as an adult. I
think it's up until 15.
It's 15, something like that. Then if you move to the country before that, then you can completely get rid of your accent, like Cornelis Vreeswijk did, the Swedish musicians. And he was from Holland, wasn't he? And he came and he was like 11 or 12 or something, and he was just perfect. But I think you're always going to have an accent. So don't let that stop you.
No.
We speak English with a Swedish accent to some extent, so that's fine, because you've got to remember that the language is about, you don't set the bar so high that you're like, well, if I'm going to speak Swedish, then it has to be like I will be mistaken for a native Swede. That's really a tough standard. I think it's impossible, actually.
I think also that people speak very different Swedish in different places of Sweden. So
we have many dialects.
So the best dialect where I come from,
it's not the best.
Doesn't sound the same as the second best dialect in Sweden. So and if you're trying to sound like someone from the southern Sweden, Skåne, for example, I really feel sorry for those who moved there trying to learn Swedish by moving to southern Sweden.
It's a strong. It's a strong dialect.
Absolutely.
So don't set the bar so high. Accept that you will always have a bit of an accent, and that's fine. Ask for feedback when you want it from your partner. I think that's fine.
And then, you know, just be patient. Oh, thank you. Here's some sweets. Not for the
She
dog.
needs it.
Not for the, I need it. And then, yeah, just be patient. And especially if you're like on level A1 or A2, it's definitely not going to be perfect. You're going to say things wrong, but who cares? Who cares?
I will care during lesson.
Well, yes, of course. And so will I. And I will pick up anything, you know, as long as, I mean, the most important thing is that you're being understood.
Communication. It's about communication.
Yeah. Going over to the next question, because we've already talked about this a little, you've mentioned it. How to know when to use en or et? This is a standard question that we always get as teachers. How do you know? Is there a rule? And the short answer is no. There is no rule. I sometimes say to students, or I tell them that Swedish is a Germanic language, so we have a lot of influence from Germany, or from German. And German has 3 genders, grammatical genders. They have masculine, feminine, and neutral or neuter. And Swedish, I believe, had masculine or feminine before, a long time ago.
Still do, kind of. Sometimes.
Sometimes with a clock.
Mm.
And boats. But anyway, what's happened with Swedish is that we've combined the German masculine or feminine to what we call common, which are the N-words, and that's why the N-word group is much bigger. So the split is something like 75-25 or 80-20, N-words being the biggest group. Now, when people hear this for the first time, they kind of say, okay, so N is the biggest group, so that means I'm just going to go for N. I'm just going to go for N for everything, and then I'll be wrong like 20% of the time. This I would advise against. I would say rather really focus on the et words, really highlight them. When you come across an et word, pay obsessive attention to them, because then you only have to learn 20 or 25% and the rest is N. So that is something that I always say, pay attention to the et words.
And you can reverse engineer sentences. So if you have,
yes.
Because the problem with N and et words is that the whole sentence rely on them sometimes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So with the pronouns, for example.
Yeah.
If you don't have a word with N and et in the sentence, but you have a pronoun that is mitt,
yeah,
or min, then you will know that this thing that is being owned by someone,
yeah,
is an N or et word, because it's min or it's mitt.
Yeah. So if it says min bil, then you know that bil is an N word because it's min.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as well, it's a little bit easier to spot the ets when you're using adjectives as well, because most adjectives will have a T on them if they describe an et word. So like.
And very often the same in plural.
Mm.
Et words.
Yes, a lot of the time the et words are the same in plural. Yeah, if they end on a consonant, that's right. So for example, if you see, I don't know, grönt hus, then grön, green, has a T on it, so then you know that hus is an et word. So you can reverse engineer it that way. You can also reverse engineer it when you get to learn the plural forms, because there you can actually see. So like the plural N words will end, at least in the indefinite form, in OR, AR, or ER, or in the definite form, ORNA, ARNA, ERNA. Yay! I can do it. So if you see that, then you know that it's an N word in singular. But there are a couple of things. I would say most words to do with human beings tend to be N. Most words with human beings, apart from barn and syskon. But they tend to be N. Most professions tend to be N as well. Whatever. A lot of animals, apart from lion, but there's quite a lot of animals that are N as well. And of course,
Yeah. So, but I think when you're learning nouns, always pay attention to if it's N or S and learn that together. So when you're learning the word for car, bil, then always take down that it's bil, en bil, bilen for the car, and then look out for, like you were saying, if it's like min or any other clue that you have. But just seeing a word on its own without anything, it's very difficult to know. If you don't know the word, it's very difficult to kind of say, oh yeah, that's it. Because there's no rules. Like, it's not like, oh, if it ends on this consonant, or if it's like this category of things in the home, or things in the, there's nothing like that, unfortunately. But it will be the smaller group, so I think it makes sense to focus on that more.
Right.
It's a good strategy.
And sometimes, what I think maybe when you've done this for a while, you learn Swedish for a while, you can get a sense of what suits and what kind of fits.
Yeah, because when you've been exposed to so many bilen, en bil, min bil, and so on and so forth, you do slowly develop just a gut feel, because it just all of a sudden it feels really wrong to say bilet because you've never heard it. Yeah. Okay, last question or request. We've been asked to do a slow-mo explanation of how to say the SJ sound, the sound. Sorry, dog is getting down from the sofa. Can't see, but I have a big dog here. So a slow-mo explanation of SJ. I think what is happening when you say SJ is, well, one way to find it is like, if you just, I'm just going to go into this blowing thing now. Okay, so yeah, thank you. So one way to find it, if you find it almost impossible to do, if you're just like, I have no idea how to do this. Okay, she's coming up here. Excuse me. Okay, which way are you going? That way. Okay. So if you just start with blowing, just like that, lips like an O position, like that. Everyone can do that, hopefully. And then if you just calm down your cheeks a bit, so instead of going like that, you just go, that's fine. And then if you keep doing this, and then if you keep doing this, and then slowly pull your tongue back inside the mouth. So put your tongue further and further back in your throat. So it's going to sound a bit like, if I start from the front. Now my tongue is right here. And I've actually tried to draw a picture of this. This looks horrible, but let me see if I can show it to you. I'm just gonna. Okay, so I just tried to show you where the tongue is. Can you see that? Yeah, that's a disgusting.
Looks like someone coughing up blood.
Yeah, it does. So basically, there's your tongue. So the tongue is not there, but it's back in your throat, but you're still blowing. And then what you can do is you can try and marry that sound, that slightly restricted sound, because your tongue is back in the throat, so it's restricted. Try and put that together very slowly with the vowels. So you kind of go, and you can make a long pause to start with. You can go, ah, e, etc. You can just try and practice that with the vowels, and then eventually you can minimize the gap. So you can go, ah, he, and so on. But try and find it first by blowing, pulling your tongue back. Tongue should be in the back, but it shouldn't sound like, I mean, that's not what it should
Only
sound
if you're
like.
from Skåne.
Yes, or if you're from Skåne, you can do that, but otherwise, no, it's a no-no. So just, So you marry them with the vowels. So that's how you end up with who. 7 or who. Who. It's really just about finding the muscles for it.
Yeah, it's back here.
Back here, tongue back, blowing, makes a restricted sound. Where. So if you find it difficult to say who, try and practice just the restricted sound first. Then try and practice oo. Get that, and then oo, oo, who, who, who. Easy peasy. No, but yeah, I hope that is helpful. So think about the tongue. It needs to be backing this word. Pulled back. Yeah. I was thinking if there was anything else that we should say.
We've been live for almost an hour.
Oh my goodness me, we've been live for almost an hour. That is crazy.
Nobody's talking to us.
Nobody's talking to us. Okay. Well, hopefully some people have seen it. We will put this out as well, so you can watch it later. Oh, one thing. Sorry, I forgot to say about the how to not feel deflated when being corrected by a partner. In March, we're putting out a little video series on YouTube. It's just very, very short story from a Swedish learner, only a couple of minutes, about something in their language journey. And actually the first video, I think it will come out whatever the first Friday is of March. That's actually a Swedish student talking about this particular thing. So she's talking about what it's like, how it feels when you're learning your partner's language and what is hard about that. Yeah, it's a really sweet video actually. So that might be useful. Okay, well, should we wrap this up?
Let's do that, yeah.
Yeah, I hope you find this useful. And
we've been rambling on here for about an hour now.
Yes, we've been ranting a bit. But we shall put some links out for you as well underneath this when we publish the video onto the grid. Okay. Right. Tack för idag.
Tack för idag. Signing off from Brighton.
Okay. Hej då!
Hej då!